Am I the butthole for refusing to give my parking spot to a disabled woman? I live in an apartment building that comes with one spot in a parking garage. My spot is the one closest to the elevator. 2 weeks ago, the apartment manager came to talk to me and asked if I would be willing to give up my spot since a disabled woman was moving in. I said sure, I would be happy to switch spaces. He said I misunderstood. He was asking me to give up a space in the garage entirely. He explained she used a van with a powered ramp, that she would need 2 spaces to be able to use it. I told him I would not give up my space. I pointed out to him that the parking spot was part of my lease. Last week I came home and there was a large van with disabled plates parked next to my spot. I pulled in, parking as far from it as I could. The next day I get a call from a woman about 7:30 a.m. She said that she was the owner of the van, needed me to move my car. I wasn't happy. I had still been asleep, but I went down to move my car. She did the same thing the next 3 days. The next morning, a Saturday, she called me at 5:30 a.m. and I told her she had to be kidding. I went down and told her that I don't wake up normally until 8:30 a.m. and I would appreciate it if she didn't call before then. She told me that she had plans and not to be a jackass. I reminded her that I was doing her a favor by coming down. That evening, 5:30 p.m., when I got home, the van was parked partially in my space so that I couldn't use it. I had her number, so I called. When she picked up, she said something snarky like, "Isn't it annoying to have to wait on someone?" I told her the difference was I could have her towed, and if she wasn't down here in 5 minutes I would. She told me I wouldn't dare and hung up on me. I waited the 5 minutes and called the tow company. It took the company about 30 minutes to get there and tow the car from my space. She never came down. She calls at 6:30 p.m. I picked up and she started screaming. I just hung up on her. She called back, still screaming. I hung up again. About 30 minutes later I get a knock on the door and she and the apartment manager is there. She asked me what hell I was thinking having her van towed. I told her that is what I am supposed to do if my space is blocked, and I did warn her first. The apartment manager said we needed to come to a compromise. I said that I did not need to compromise. According to my lease I am entitled to a parking spot. I never agreed to be woken up early every day, and I certainly ever agreed to give up my spot entirely. She said that she was promised a spot she could use. What was she supposed to do? I told her that she needed to work that out with him, pointing at apartment manager, and leave me out of it. I am done running every time she calls. She called me a butthole as they left. I feel bad. There aren't any extra spots. It's 1 per apartment. This isn't her fault, but it isn't mine either. Am I the butthole for not making more of an effort to help? NTA. Providing an accessible space is the responsibility of the apartment owner, not you. If you're entitled to the space you have as part of your lease, then you shouldn't need to give it up. This is on the manager for not having more accessible parking spots handy. I'm fairly sure that any parking garage would have requirements for accessible parking spots, assuming this is in the USA and subject to AITA requirements. Original Poster could probably point this out to the woman and offer to help her figure out who would be best to contact about it if they wanted to be kind. It gets complicated by the fact that resident parking isn't parking for a public accommodation. Parking in a mall's parking garage would be parking for a public accommodation, for example. Different rules apply, and I don't know the specifics off the top of my head. Yeah, my apartment complex, none of the spaces are larger for handicapped vehicles. I live in the USA, and in a major metropolitan area too. I've never actually thought about it before, but all our spaces are identical. That said, manager lied. He should not have promised her something he couldn't deliver. And if he was coming to Original Poster to try to fix a problem that was his fault, he should have been offering Original Poster something. Like, I'll take X off your rent each month if you give up your space / agree to move the car every morning / whatever. Or contacted everyone to see if anyone wanted X off rent to give up their space, then shuffled so she was next to the empty spot. Obviously this would be optional, but if he expects his tenants to choose to give up something granted by their lease, he really needs to give them some sort of motivation to do so. Not just keep paying for a service I take away from you. But, that would be rational. OMG, is that a thing? Let's hope it doesn't take off, or most Reddit subs would be out of new posts. I don't know about your state, but in my state, there is a formula that multifamily housing needs to have a certain percentage of handicap parking for however many units there are. I'm almost positive that the person with the van would have a lawsuit there to at least recover the cost of the tow. Plus, how did they get Op's phone number? If the manager gave it to them, I'm pretty sure that's not allowed either. Apparently manager gave them Op's number without Op's permission. Manger is being shady, and this situation is more manager's fault than the poor neighbors. She was clearly misled. She told original poster she was promised a spot she could access. And she can't access it with Op's car and Op's spot, so this woman is trapped and can't do basic things like go to work. I feel awful for her. Original comment got removed, so I have to change wording. Oh, 100%. I feel like this is something that a real estate or AITA lawyer only dreams about though. Especially if it's a management company. There are questionable lawyers that will sue real estate agents for AITA noncompliance for using walking distance in their descriptions. If you can be found responsible for that, I don't see how the management can't be held responsible for this. That is like the case for newer buildings, but I doubt it required old building to retrofit. Though it is required that they make reasonable accommodations for residents that require them. The apartment manager needed to find a real solution at the time of leasing. Asking for a volunteer to give up their space in exchange for a discount would be an excellent option. Another would be measuring the spots and restriping a portion of them to make space. For example, if they're all the same size, then some may be able to convert to compact spaces. But asking original poster a question which there was only one acceptable answer and having no backup plan. That's not providing accommodations at all. Edit, correcting the autocorrect. You would have to take off at least $500 or so a month if you wanted me to wake up between 5:30 and 7:30 a.m. You'd have to be paying me to live there. Yes, I bet there's one person in that building who doesn't drive. In my country, it's possible to rent your parking spot. My family had 2 parking spots in a building and we only had 1 car, so my neighbor who needed another spot paid us every month to use our parking spot. I don't know how it works in the US though. Totally not the butthole op. Not your problem to solve. That would result in needing to draft a new leasing contract, though. If the complex is owned by a larger company, they might have a standard contract that the managers can't make alterations to. It depends on the US city codes. Municipal/public parking is usually like you described, but a private garage is different. It may not have AITA-compliant parking because the building is grandfathered from current codes until there is any type of construction, and I've seen examples where it is a certain min percentage of the building under construction before it needs to be upgraded for compliance. AITA only applies to public spaces, not private living arrangements. Call bullcrap. Landlord here. All of our properties that are for lease have to be up to AITA standards. You can be grandfathered in. It's how my college got away with having 0 AITA-compliant dorms and only a couple compliant academic buildings, lots of little stairs, entrances to dorms between floors, etc. All the off-campus apartments are the same way at my college. Apparently some of them use the excuse that the building is historic, and some of the others just refuse to do any serious repairs that would force them to then have to comply with AITA. There is a law specific to apartments called fair housing. It's been a while since I've worked in property management, but I'm pretty sure this would fall under that. I believe this is correct. Owning a residential building for the purposes of renting it out and earning income subjects the owner to additional scrutiny in regards to anti-discrimination and fair housing rules. In addition to the comment below, even if they are grandfathered out of AITA compliance, not having accessible parking could still be violation of the Fair Housing Act. Technically, yes. It's the FHA, and ANSI 117.1 to 2009 is incorporated into state building codes that governs apartment buildings. Source: just this morning I got a snarky email from a code consultant when I mentioned AITA when I should have said FHA. I work in property management and there are a ifn of problems with this. 1. Why aren't there accessible spaces on property for them to use? 2. If there are 0 additional spaces available, there's almost always wiggle room. This is lazy property management if I've ever seen it. 3. How the F did the other resident get your number? If the PM gave it out without your permission, I'd be livid. 4. Why not park them on an end spot where there's room next to the van that can't be used for parking? There's tons of dead space in garages, again lazy PM. NTA, and you best believe the PM would be getting their butt reamed from me. I don't think you're a butthole for your actions, and the person with the van seems a little entitled, but overall the biggest butthole here is the person whose job it is to deal with this. Literally their effing job, and they're effing it up. Why not park them on an end spot where there's room next to the van that can't be used for parking? This was my thought. I'm picturing two cars pulled in beside each other head first, so her passenger side to ops driver side and ops passenger side toward open space/elevators. And the other woman needs extra space on her passenger side for a ramp to load a wheelchair. If they switch spots, her passenger side would be by the open space. Or am I missing something? I feel like this is maybe too simple of an answer if none of these people didn't see it, but maybe there are posts or something between ops space and the elevators? If they park them on an end spot, they'd need to provide an accessible pathway, clearly marked, level, of sufficient width, etc., from that spot to exits an elevator. Yeah, I mean, obviously without seeing the garage in person, this is not really an argument worth having. My point was more along the lines of, is there not a more creative solution that doesn't involve this person using more than one parking place? I could be wrong, but your apartment owner by law has to accommodate the disabled. However, not at your expense. Turn your phone off when you're sleeping. Stop answering when she calls. Stop answering the door when she knocks. She's the apartment manager's problem, not the butthole. Op should also install some sort of camera in their car in case she decides to key it. Or in case she decides to retaliate and have it towed. The problem is that she could not legally do this if original poster was parked in the spot that they are renting. In my experience, most private parking lots/garages have some way of verifying the ownership of that space. The license plate numbers and car makes/models are generally linked to the parking pass/sticker/whatever and registered with the local parking enforcement department so that they won't be wrongly ticketed or towed. Similarly, most such places require some form of parking pass, linked to all of that same information, so that any towing company will recognize it. So it's incredibly unlikely that any local towing company would tow a car parked in the space that it's registered to park in. The second problem is that even if she managed to do so, she would be legally liable for all fees incurred and would also very likely be breaking the terms of her lease agreement. In other words, original poster could very easily sue her, and she could also be kicked out of the apartment complex. Especially since there are 100% cameras in that parking garage that would catch her in the act. TLDR, it's incredibly difficult to vindictively and wrongly get a car that is parked 100% legally towed, especially in a privately owned parking garage that original poster pays for access to. Even if she did manage to get it done, she would have a sub-zero chance of actually getting away with it. It would inconvenience original poster slightly and ultimately cost her hundreds of dollars in legal fees, whatever original poster could get away with suing her for, and even potentially her apartment. Jumping on this top comment to ask original poster to please provide an update when this is finally resolved. By the way, most definitely not the butthole. Someone who uses accessible spaces here. My neighbor and I sometimes squabbled over the one accessible space in my former apartment complex. But I stopped because you know what I realized, that's the owner's fault for not being accessible. Not either of ours. We are all just doing our best. The other woman isn't really the butthole significantly in my opinion either, maybe to original poster but not in general, because it just sucks, and if they don't have someone to pull their car out for them and need the ramp. Yeah, they're basically screwed unless original poster moves their car. Imagine trying to get to work etc. However, shouldn't be taking it out on original poster because original poster should have been offered a spot somewhere else. The only major butthole is the owners/landlords. They need to work it out. Y'all shouldn't have to fight to park in a way that is safe and reasonable. NTA. You've been accommodating. It's one thing to switch spots but quite another to be expected to give up your spot and then have them treat you like you're the wrong party here. They are both buttholes. Further, if this is the US, I believe the apartment owner may even face legal consequences, fines, if they can't provide disabled access. I'm not sure if there are consequences for this. I'm not an expert, but I've been doing a bit of Googling and it's not real clear. This isn't a public parking garage, it's private and it's one spot per apartment. Some of the links I find seem to say that it has to be van accessible and others seem to say it's not. It's a very small parking garage and there isn't any way to widen a space without removing one. My guess is that the apartment manager will need to buy out another tenant to give this woman an extra parking spot. Someone will have to give up theirs and should be offered a reduction in rent for doing so. No one should give up their spot for free. Once a spot is freed up, swapping spots can occur so she has two together. Not the butthole. I remember an old /legal advice post that pretty much had the same premise. The consensus was that the apartment manager effed up. You shouldn't trust our /legal advice, they spread tons of misinformation and ban lots of actual lawyers. Landlords are obligated to provide reasonable accommodations for disabilities. Taking away an amenity that is written into your lease is not reasonable. Giving another resident use of something that you exclusively pay for is not reasonable. Since it is not a publicly accessible parking garage, it would probably be governed under Fair Housing Act. Which is also probably why your landlord has no backbone about this issue. Lawyer would be helpful for you. Not the butthole. Can you call your local code enforcement and find out if he's required to have one? Either way, I do the same thing over and over if she keeps parking in your spot. Her issue is with him being greedy enough to lie to her to get her to move in. This is his drama. Next time, don't even answer the door. Can you call your local code enforcement and find out if he's required to have one? Why even bother? Just park like before, set your phone to do not disturb before 8:30 and get on with your day. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.